Hey there, all you Gen X fans out there. Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about determining your why. We're talking about thinking preparedness. And reminding us all to be thinking about that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Yes,
always thinking preparedness.
So I'm one of your hosts, Matt Marshall, here to remind us that with preparedness comes comfort, with preparedness comes peace, something we could all use a bit more of.
And I'm Ed Wasson, aka Wilksy, also reminding you, thinking preparedness. And with preparedness comes peace. With preparedness comes comfort, something that we could all use more of.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah.
So, Ed, in today's show, I think we're going to take a little bit of a different turn.
Sure.
I thought it might be interesting to share with the listeners kind of some of our personal history, maybe explain a little bit about why we think preparedness is so important to us.
Ooh, personal history. Ooh.
So yeah, I know it gets a little uncomfortable sometimes, but what I wanted to start with, I started asking myself what got me started in preparedness. And I really had to think back, maybe do a little soul searching. So first off, a person can't really go through 2020, 2021 without at least thinking a little bit about preparedness.
No,
right? About being ready for those difficult times. Nothing like a pandemic to kind of instigate that fight or flight thing going on, right? But what it also started doing is it started me thinking back a little bit further.
Yeah.
And for me personally, what came up was the September 11th, 2001,
yeah,
right?
The terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. Yeah. And that brings up a point that we're going to have a show specially dedicated in honor and remembrance of that terrible event, in which we're going to be interviewing some of the people that were either actually on the ground in some spots, either New York City or Washington, D.C. during those attacks, or they're actually still in the fight.
That's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward. We've already started interviewing some folks and doing some recording. It's very exciting.
It's incredible
to hear some of these folks' stories.
Yeah, some of the stories are really good. It's really good conversation to hear a lot of the people's whys and what they're thinking about from that day to today.
Yeah, now that event itself caused so many people to start thinking about what would happen if, how do I get home safe if, how do I get away from my office or my home if something happens? And so that was, and it's interesting because it was kind of this, I think a really emotional time for so many different people.
Absolutely.
Because we started thinking that there are other cultures around the world that maybe don't like us that much.
This was the eye opener. This is the wake up call.
And it made the US population become so adversely affected. We were attacked flat out, So that was a big one, right? You've got the pandemic of 2020, you've got the terrorist attack of 2001. But then, so I'm a computer guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm very technically oriented.
I know where you're going with this one.
Yes, sir. I remember it well. 2000, the year 2000 to
Y2K.
Computers was an absolute nightmare. And it took several years leading up to 2000 for computer geniuses to realize that, oh my gosh, something huge could happen here. Infrastructure could collapse.
That's what they said.
Water systems no longer. It was Y2K that actually brought me to buy 2 guns.
Wow.
Because I was so convinced, being a computer guy myself, I was so convinced the world would stop on the evening.
Was there anybody in the background telling you invest in gold?
Many people. Yeah, I didn't buy any because I was a poor sap. But
You
boy,
bought guns instead.
but I could go to the pawn shop and I could buy a $300 shotgun, and I still have it, by the way.
And a shotgun, the good thing about a shotgun is a shotgun's got a good spread.
It
It
does.
means that you don't have to be very accurate. Whatever
Yes.
problem you had over here, kapow!
Kapow!
It ain't there no more.
Oh.
It's got a good spread.
And according to Hollywood, the spread goes from here to 10 feet, goes out like this, and it it doesn't do that. It does.
Everything
We should all know this.
Everybody falls down.
Everyone falls down. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. 10 feet away and 50 people go down.
Got a good spread.
That's not what happens. But hey, let's get back to the topic, I guess. Anyways, so it was Y2K that freaked me out a little bit. But you think about it now, that's way back. Now we're 1999, when I was kind of freaking out about that. And then of course, you can't be a Gen Xer without having grown up during the Cold War.
Yep. And
being trained in your mind that if you hear that alarm going off, you hit the ground, you find a bunker, you know something's coming. Get under your desk, right? There were always these kind of emergency drills, just like they do active shooter drills in schools today.
Yeah,
that was common for us.
That's an interesting parallel, Matt, because there's a lot of the folks maybe in Gen Y or Gen Z that don't relate to all that so much, and they hardly remember 9/11, and most of them probably don't even think about Y2K or the panic that caused, and then the anthrax scare after 9/11, things like that. But now they're thinking about like active shooters. So the threat for their day right now is somebody like you who's got a gun.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the people who have the guns, the good people who have the guns, are thinking, I'm going to be your protection against that active shooter. I'm not going to be the shooter.
But there's so many people on that other end of the spectrum that say, why do we need guns?
Yeah. Why do we need guns? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of discussion, debate, contention, both sides of the spectrum here. But yeah, so what all you're talking about, all the things that got you thinking about preparedness, Matt? Go on, tell us about.
Well, I wanted to actually ask you a question first. I mean, it's you can't have gone through the Cold War years, and we were like well at the end of that, because during our lifetime we saw the wall come down, the Iron Curtain, right?
Yep.
We saw, a year after the wall came down, and Reagan stood out there and said, tear down that wall, and they tore down that wall in Germany. All of that, a year after that, I was actually in Berlin for the reunification of Germany. Wow. And I was there during the celebrations. There was actually a riot that took place at Alexanderplatz, and there was like riot gear and all sorts of crazy stuff going on. It was wild. So,
and the Berlin police don't mess around.
No, they do not. We actually met this really tall German dude he must have been, I don't know, 6'5", something like that. Really tall, kind of husky looking guy, wore a dark leather jacket. And he comes up to us and he says, hey, yeah, so, and he was trying to be friends with us. And he said, it's okay. Yeah, there's stuff going on over there, but I'm okay. And he pulls out this little bitty gun, and we're like, well, cool. Very nice to meet you. We're going to step over here for a little bit. And we were like, well, let's get the heck out of here.
Yeah. Anyway, it's scary being in a foreign country and you're talking to somebody who's got a gun in their hand.
Yeah, exactly. It was very, very strange.
Yeah.
But so I was wondering, what was your impression during those Cold War years?
Well, the Cold War years for me was more about being oblivious for me at that time. When I was a teenager going through all that in the mid to late 80s, I was zoned in on MTV and just being a miscreant. But
I can attest.
Yeah, and there wasn't I don't think an iota of preparedness in me at the time. I'd already got it in my head that I was going to join the Marines and that was going to be it. I didn't really have a game plan at all. I was just my plan was get out of my dad's house, get out of this town, get in the Marines, and after that, let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal. Yeah, I can remember. Now I didn't necessarily. I was very, very similar. I mean, we were playing games. We were causing some trouble in your neighborhood,
some hate and discontent.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But there was always this lingering thing. I remember it, and the times that it hits me the most is I was actually somewhat of an art guy. I'm not an artsy person today, but back then, because I could and it was an easy class, I would take art classes. And most of the art that I remember from the day was melting faces, you know, big bomb thing going off in the background. I remember drawing an award-winning drawing that I did. I was so proud of this drawing, but it was basically a skeleton, a face of a skeleton melting, looking in a rear view mirror, and in the rear view mirror is a nuclear explosion,
like a mushroom cloud. I was gonna say,
but I remember in my mind, I had the fear, you know, no matter what was going, I remember having the fear that something could happen at any point.
Yeah, I remember that. From that perspective, I remember that was about the time I started getting into Metallica and some of the more that kind of heavy metal, and some of it was thrash, and they were taught, like, there was Nuclear Assault. That there was actually a band called Nuclear Assault, and they were coming out. I mean, it was getting more mainstream pipe to me just before I got out of high school in '87. And then by the time I got out of Marine Corps boot camp and infantry school and all that, I started buying those tapes and listening to that. So I was more and more in that. So it was a lot of music anyway. And a lot of the movies that we watched in the '80s too were about nuclear disaster. There's like a,
oh my gosh, so much
sister to the Left Behind series type stuff. The Day After or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Night of the Comet, and a lot of that zombie apocalypse. A lot of that zombie apocalypse stuff started back in the '80s. In our generation, that started all the coolest stuff that's still in fashion today. We were cool when it wasn't cool to be cool.
Totally cool. We had
the best music. We had the best music videos. That's why a lot of people in just still to this day are still listening to '80s music. They're going back and they're reviewing, like, well, wait a second, this is a lot like what's going on today.
Yeah, exactly. That's a beautiful thing about how when we grew up. I saw one of those if you're from the '80s, you'll know what this was, but it showed my what was it, the something about my liquid of the day or something like that, and it was a hose. It was a garden hose with water turned on. This is my Gatorade from today, or for today. It was just water coming out of a hose, because you'd run to the closest friend's house, open the faucet and start drinking from the faucet, and then go run off again. So crazy stuff, crazy times.
Somehow we made it.
Yeah.
That's like Eleanor Roosevelt said, "This too shall pass."
Yeah. Or what Gandalf said, "None shall pass." I think we
shall pass.
I think we passed.
Yeah.
There was one more thing I wanted to share, and this is something that my dad did for us.
Yeah, I remember your dad. He was cool.
He was an all right guy, and still is.
He talked a lot, though.
Still is. He might hear this, by the way, so be careful.
But I remember him lecturing, man. He would be lecturing.
He was the king of lecture.
Yeah, anyways, Matt, you guys need to, one of these days, I don't even remember what he said. I just remember he would talk to us a lot.
Yes. Yeah, that was my dad. But
I love him, though.
Yeah, but one of the things he would do for us when I was a kid, when we'd go to a restaurant, we would sit down and he would ask us questions. So they were always games that we were
Mhm.
playing back then, or I considered them as games. And the game was effectively, how many people wearing hats did you see walking in?
Ah.
Or how many people were wearing glasses?
Hmm.
And what it did, so
Interesting.
this was back in that would have been like the early 80s time frame
Yeah.
when he would play that game.
Interesting.
I went back because one of my favorite movies is Born Identity.
Yeah.
And there's this scene where Jason Bourne and his lead lady, they're sitting there in a cafe, and he's asking the question, you know, why am I like this?
Yeah.
Why do
Because
I
he
know
doesn't
all these
remember.
things?
I
And
just know that
yeah,
I
he
can tell
says,
you that the license plate of that truck, that car out there, and
yeah.
all I know is at this elevation, I can flat out run for 5 minutes or
Before
however
I
much,
start breathing heavy or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I remember doing that. I remember sitting in a cafe with my dad, and he's saying, okay, what do you remember about the guy that's sitting, 3 tables back? And I'd have to go, well, let's see. I remember he was wearing X, Y, and Z, and he was doing this, and I'm thinking I'm scoring all these points in this game.
Right.
And then he says, yeah, but what color shirt was he wearing? I'm like,
Keeps asking questions,
well,
get
I
more
don't know.
information out of you if you got it.
And eventually I'm just like, forget it. I'm not that good. But anyways, when I saw Jason Bourne do it, I was like, God, man, there's no way I'll be that good.
There's actually more movies out there like that. There's one, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now, but Robert Redford is, I think in this movie, it's Robert Redford is the top CIA guy, or not the, in the story, he's the handler of, not Matt Damon. Who's that other actor?
Matt Damon's buddy.
Not Matt Damon's buddy. At any rate, I can't think of the other actor, but anyway, Spy Game. The movie is Spy Game.
Okay.
And he's recruited that younger actor as a former Vietnam veteran Marine sniper out of Vietnam, and he's recruiting him into the CIA, and he's trying to train him in fieldcraft. And they go into a bar, and he's like saying, what'd you notice about this, and what'd you notice about that? And the guy's like, how was I supposed to be able to see that? Do I have supposed to have eyes in the back of my head? And he's like, well, there's a mirror right there. Things like that. Now,
he simplifies it. Yep.
Yeah. And now I want you to go, you have half an hour to get up in that apartment. I don't care how, and get me a view of this over here. And that's when he went up there, and he basically just knocked on the door and said, probably, can I have some tea with you and you tell me about your neighborhood or something like that? And the girl brought him in, and next thing Robert Redford knew, his little source was up there in the balcony having
toasting
tea with some old lady. Yeah. So there's a way, is skills of observation, and what there's training methods you can do for recollection, and some people have better photographic memory, and those guys actually get recruited a little bit, from what I understand. But go along these lines, one of the things a guy in martial arts was telling me to do was make observations based on the threats that you perceive. So like, hey, this guy over here, that's not a threat. This guy over here, he's really heavy or something like that. He's not a threat.
Yeah.
Well, this guy over here looks like, number one, he'd be able to handle himself, but also, is he going to be an earth force, a fire force, or a water force, or a wind force?
From a martial arts perspective.
From a martial arts perspective, because you don't have to say, assess what you are. If this guy comes at you, how's he probably going to come at you? How are you going to have to counter it? Because you're probably just basically maybe a water force.
Mm.
And this is a really bigger guy. So he's probably going to come at you as like an earth force and try to overpower you. Or maybe he's a littler guy, but you can tell he really knows how to handle himself. So maybe he's going to try to do some spinning jump kicks on you. He's going to be that wind force.
Yeah, right.
So this guy was trying to teach me the powers of observation also from a threat perspective.
Oh, that's excellent. That's
Yeah.
that's actually one of the blog posts that I'm actually working on right now is around situational awareness, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things it says is situational. One of the definitions I found was situational awareness is it's intended to help you deal with the potential threats that are out there.
Yeah.
That's part of this whole observation game.
Yeah, and that's interesting because nowadays you have to tell kids, you have to look up from your cell phone occasionally so you have situational awareness, because if you're walking through the bad part of town, you're playing Pokemon Go, the next thing you know, you're a robbery victim.
Yeah. You're laying on the ground with no phone and no wallet. Yeah.
Yeah, and people like the predator types are going to always try to pick the lowest fruit, So if they see that you have that vulnerability or weakness, whereas that's another thing as far as like not delving a little bit away from the situational awareness, but carrying and presenting yourself in certain situations. If you're in certain areas, you're walking alert, you're walking tall, people are going to say, oh, this guy, probably don't mess with him. And if you're like a pencil neck geek walking through playing Pokemon Go, they're going to say, oh, there's low hanging fruit and looks like he's got a wallet in his back pocket. Let's go ahead and just take his milk money.
So I've got a gosh, that makes me think of so many directions here, because
I know, right?
I'm thinking from when I was during the college years. I was working a job at a Kinko's Copies, and for those who don't know what that is, FedEx bought Kinko's. Kinko's was the original Professor's publishing stuff, but they were in every college town. Right.
I remember when you worked at Kinko's right there on University.
Yeah, that's right. And my apartment that I lived in was probably about 3 miles away. And this was during college years. So my car, I would basically leave at home because I didn't want to, spend money on gas or anything like that.
You could walk to work, right?
So I would walk to and from work.
Yeah.
But my job was 3 o'clock till midnight.
Oh, and that's not a good area of town.
It is not a good area. In fact, it was down close to the airport, and
it's near the war zone. They still to this day call it the war zone.
Yeah. So it was it was awesome. And I remember so many evenings. But what I would do is, to your point, I'd wear a heavy jacket. And I'd walk around kind of mean with a mean look on my face,
and look alert,
like, don't mess with me, man. Don't mess with me. And I wouldn't say anything. I'd just stare people down, and I'd be like, come on, man, I can't wait. I'm not trying to make them fight. I'm not trying to make them fight. I'm just saying I'm not a good target. That's all. You know?
And for our listeners that might be out there and they're not very familiar with what we're talking about, Albuquerque, New Mexico has for probably over 20 years ranked in the top as far as violent crime cities. And this particular area of Albuquerque, although it's really close to the university, because it's like right on university. So there's UNM there, University of New Mexico.
Yep.
Decent college campus and everything. But the demographics of the area is that there's a big neighborhood between University and Yale. And on Yale's side, you have the Air Force Base. So on the Air Force Base side, nice and safe also on the base.
Yeah.
Outside, base housing out in town and everything. You've got the demographics of a whole bunch of young people that are in that risk-taking stage of their life. Plus, on both sides, on East and West, you have rival gangs and stuff like that. So there's a lot of people dealing drugs. There's a lot of homeless people.
Yeah.
A lot of bad elements there. So there's part of that area not too far from University and about, I'd say Manal maybe, that they to this day still call it the war zone. And they used to have drive-bys out there all the time, stuff like that. So this area that Matt was walking to and from work at was not far from a really very high risk area. High risk. And it goes to risk assessment.
And isn't it ironic that here I am, Mr. Preparedness, and always be prepared, and I was walking through a war zone.
Obviously, there's a reason you're still here.
Yeah, I was prepared.
Part of it's probably luck, but
yeah, probably. We'll chalk it up as luck. Yeah.
Nah, you're on the ball.
So this kind of leads into a discussion of determining your why, and now Ed's mentioned it before. What kind of some of the things that means to determine your why. We have some reasons why we've started this podcast and YouTube channel, and the whole point is we have thoughts, we have ideas, we have reasons why people should be prepared, why they should get prepared, and start preparing their families and their communities. That's the goal, is to try to prepare our families and communities. And it's simply put to prepare for difficult times. And so, but I think a big part of that, Ed, as we've talked about, is trying to introduce and determine your own why as a listener. Think to yourself, why would I need to become prepared? Why would I need to?
And that goes to your personal, like you said, it's your personal thing. Hey, you might have your personal story and I have my personal story, but the big thing is, Matt, if you figure out your why, that is going to help you figure out your how. You figure out your why, and you're going to figure out your how. And for me, when I was younger, I had different whys. Now I'm older, and my why is my family, like my wife Nisha and her kids, my brother Steve and his wife Carmelita, and my niece Bella, and they are my why. Why are you prepared? Why do you want to mentally and psychologically be prepared to maybe step up in some sort of little bit of a leadership role in hard times or whatever? Because I feel like I've lived through some more interesting, challenging, or difficult times than some people as far as like extremes go with the military and law enforcement. So when that time comes, whether it's the loss of a loved one or it's maybe even a financial or disaster, like somebody has a really bad economic downturn or something like that, or they lose a lot in finances, or there's a natural disaster. I want to be able to, that's one of the things for me, that's my why, is I want to be able to step up and comfort them in some ways. And then how do I do that? Well, I do it by leading by example and by preparing myself and reflecting back on my experiences.
Yeah. For me, it always comes back to that little tagline that we say usually at the beginning of each show, which is, with preparedness comes comfort, with preparedness comes peace. And that is something we can all use a bit more of, because we do live in a very stressful life.
It's very stressful time.
No matter what level of government or corporate or whatever personal you live in. There's always stress.
I would say these times are probably right up there with like the Cuban Missile Crisis and that level of Cold War. So you had Cold War with Russia, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, you had possibility of troops going into Vietnam, you had kids practicing to get under their desks in case of a nuclear strike. And I would say nowadays, we might even be higher level than that, because we've got so much in politics and so much writing on finances and economies of that are pretty volatile in coupled with COVID, and people have been cooped up for over 18 months, and it's a hot summer. So the summer of 2021 has probably been one of the most tense times in U.S. history.
Yeah. It seems like, I mean, there was some pretty severe stress last year with all the economic and racial conflict that was happening in the different cities. That was some tremendous, and that's basically, I think, when it boiled over and people started realizing, holy crap, this isn't just people talking about stuff on the news or talking about stuff in politics or government. These are real people who are actually shooting each other in the streets because they disagree.
Yeah, and that what I just said did touch on like the racial conflicts and stuff like that. The left and right, Democrat, Republican, Antifa, alt-right, all those guys, January 6th, all that kind of stuff. We are living in some strange times, like that John Lennon song. Nobody told me there'd be days like this.
Yeah, man.
Strange days indeed.
Yeah.
Woo!
I guess one of the questions I want to ask is, what do you think are some of the common reasons why our audience might want to be more prepared? And do you think they're more external things going on, meaning things going on in politics or the world or war or whatever? Or do you think it's more internal, meaning they've gone through their own struggles and they just come up with this urge inside that says, I got to be prepared?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And it goes back to a variety of different things. Somebody asked me, I think it was like 25 years ago, what do you think about, they were trying to give me like a very brief political spectrum quiz to see where I was at on the political spectrum kind of thing. And they asked me, what do you think of the government, politics and this and that and the other? And I said back then, I think if the US government could get away with it, they would actually charge you for breathing fresh air. And here we are 25 years later, and a lot of places you go, they're asking you to wear masks and things like this. And when it comes to preparedness, the main thing I like to try to tell people is Semper Gumby. The Marine Corps motto is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. My motto for preparedness is Semper Gumby, always flexible. You never can tell what's going to happen, and it's hard to make that determination. So what you want to have your mind, if you can sort of train it that way, is to be fluid. If anything happens, you should, and the reasons why you want to be prepared in these days is you don't know if it's an internal or external type of threat. Is it part of a weakness or vulnerability that the US has? Because trust me, from Homeland Security studies perspectives, we know that the US has probably hands down one of the best infrastructures in the world. And that includes a series of multiple redundancies. However, the COVID pandemic proved that even though Bush brought this thing up to Fauci back in 2007 and said, hey, these pandemics happen every 100 years. We need to get ready for this. Government shelved this as like a back burner topic until it was too late. And supposedly the WHO or CDC had a playbook and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, what we on the ground know is that they're saying masks and they don't have enough PPE. They're saying, we got to get vaccines, but we don't have this vaccine yet. There wasn't really much of a game plan in play for COVID. So you got a pandemic that I don't think hardly anybody could have prepared enough for, even though there were some people that said after the swine flu, hey, this is going to happen again. And I don't know how we prepare for it, but if it's a new strain, somehow, some way, you're going to need a flu shot. Or what else can you do to prepare for that? Well, you can stay healthy. You can eat healthy. You can work out a little bit. Keep your cardiovascular up. That's going to immediately take a lot of risk off the table. You can have your herbs and vitamins and minerals such as zinc. There's other vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D3. There's a bunch of other over-the-counter stuff that you could be taking that, for the most part, will probably, if you're under 60, 65 or so, and you're maintaining health and in decent health, and you're eating okay, and you take some of these vitamins and minerals, you're prepared, and your body is prepared for, let's say, COVID or any other new novel coronavirus or whatever else. Is it going to be an economic collapse? This is serious, because it's not, every other year or something. it's almost every day. You turn the page and it's almost every day in the news. There's a US headquartered global corporation being fined millions of dollars for lack of compliance or being corrupt or financing terrorism or doing business with cartels or defrauding their customers. Enron was a kind of a big deal in its day. But since Enron and even before Enron, it's been like every month or so, something like this happens. And sooner or later, the bubble's going to burst again for the 2008 thing.
Yeah.
It's going to happen again. So you need to be prepared for that. What if your money or liquidable assets lose value? You have enough going on to last 3 weeks, 3 months. Those are just a few things. What if another terrorist attack happens? We've got the current president wants to pull out of Afghanistan. That's going to immediately open up a variety of threat
potential. Yeah. Absolutely.
Not just in that region, but globally, because that area of Afghanistan is a transit area and a training grounds. It's known safe harbor for terrorism. Without a huge coalition presence there that benefits the whole regional area from Pakistan, Iran, India, China, Russia, they all benefit from having a coalition force there that's buffering a lot of that problem. Without that coalition force there, that's like taking a big Band-Aid off a huge sucking chest wound. And once more people, not just terrorists, but transnational criminal organizations, once they start just running amok through there, that area is going to be a platform, a jumping platform for all kinds of groups to just create all kinds of havoc, not just regionally, but a lot of these groups, like the Taliban, will probably align again with a radical Islamist group with global outreach to strike. And we've got agents here in America that are actively targeting American and Israeli targets, or what they perceive to be Israeli embassies, maybe Israeli personnel. Just a few years ago, the FBI busted IRGC linked and Hezbollah linked pair. One was in New York and one was in Detroit, and they were basically trained as saboteur spies by the Iranian government. They were both Lebanese, and they were looking at targets in New York and elsewhere. And not only had one of them snuck up through the border of Mexico, one of them was related to a guy from about 15 years ago that snuck up through the Mexico border and was busted by the FBI back then. So there's a whole family thing going on here. So you have to look at the parallels and everything else like that. But there's a variety of vulnerabilities that we have, weaknesses. We need to try to identify those and strengthen those. And there's a whole bunch of threat that's out there, whether it's external or internal, and we need to try to fortify ourselves against the threats as well. So there's a lot of reasons why. Why do you need to prepare? Once you figure out your why, is it your family? Is it your personal thing? Then you're going to figure out your how. Figure out exactly what works for you as an individual. What do I need to get to the next day, to the next week, to the next month with hardly anything going on? I can't drive my car. My money is worthless or something. I don't have work because work is shut down. How many of us were just completely out of work from COVID?
Yeah, last year. Yeah, that's right.
So just keep that in mind. Keep preparing, guys. Keep preparing mentally, psychologically, and actually materialistically.
This is actually pretty exciting because we're early in this podcast adventure that we're on. But there's so many different avenues to go from that. One of the things I would love to talk about is kind of comparing those high impact, low frequency, high impact, high frequency type of events that could occur, and how do you take different things like a terrorist attack or an EMP or a hurricane or a tornado or whatever it might be? How do I take those different types of events that occur and put them into a category that makes me think, that gives me a why? Okay.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
I've got a good example. You and I come from a very small town.
Yeah.
We all know that we come from Aztec, New Mexico.
6,000 people and 6 old sore heads.
6 old sore heads. And that sign is still up to this day,
It's
I believe.
still there.
So the thing is, we're on social media and we see on Facebook posts and stuff like this. It was, I think it's about little over 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A kid went into Aztec High School and he just started shooting.
Yeah.
And he killed 2 people, and I believe the police ended up shooting him. I don't know if they killed him or not. But number one, we have high school friends in our circle of friends, that 2 or 3 of them, and I'm not saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying, they were saying like, oh, I can't believe this happened. Not at our high school. I mean, and to say that is one thing, but do you really mean it? Because not only did it happen, and it has happened at a lot of other places,
Mm-hmm.
but we know kids from our high school that have been shot before. There's kids in our class. Now, they weren't shot at Aztec or in the school, but they were at another college in New Mexico, and they were at a house party, and somebody just comes up to the party and just shoots this kid from Aztec right in the heart with a 22 pistol, just killed him before he hit the ground.
A 22.
A 22 pistol.
Which is a tiny
Yep.
little thing.
Yep. And it bounced around through him, and it's it's terribly tragic. And the thing is, that's one of those categories that's as tragic as it is. You have to understand it's not as everyday as an auto accident,
Right.
but you have to prepare for it. So, and as a matter of fact, Nisha just got into another auto accident.
Oh.
She tried to avoid somebody swerved into her lane, and she did an avoidance maneuver and crashed into a pillar. Now, so she texts me, and if she's texting me at this hour of the morning, and I just got to work myself, I'm getting a text at that point in the morning, and I know
something's not right.
I wonder if she got in an auto accident. So with experience, and this is something that I talked to some people in the Gen Z that are like 18 to 25 or so. They're in this generation that a lot of them don't have as much respect for life experience and education. They're getting out of college. They want to get out there, and I applaud them for wanting to get out there, but they want you to respect them for life experience that they don't have, some of them.
Yes.
But they don't want to respect that you are in your 50s or more, and you have twice the life experience. And for me, when I get a text like this, I know something ain't right. And sure enough, when I open it up, and that comes from life experience, and you as an individual, for all your families and friends, you should know how somebody looks and acts and talks and carries themselves on a daily basis, to know individuals. Are they having a good day? Are they having a bad day? Are you detecting a signal of duress from them? Or like, hey, wait a second, that clerk in that convenience store is being robbed right now. And that comes from life experience, and that comes from observation powers and stuff. That, I'm sorry, guys, no disrespect to those, but sometimes some of y'all, if you don't have that experience, you may not recognize it, and you might want to defer to some older people who do have that life experience. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be unsure, not know the answers, or have questions and say, hey man, what's going on here with Matt today? Maybe somebody is like in their 20s and not as familiar with it, but they know something's going on with Matt. They can ask me, because they don't know us very well, but they know I'm a good friend of Matt. And I'll look at them like, oh, that's not feeling good today.
That's not
something's
right.
going on. So there's a lot of signals and stuff. You prepare mentally, and you know it, and you feel it. It's almost like the force. This is something Gen Z will be able to get into, even though Star Wars came out in our time. You guys are still into it, and you know the force. Use the force. Have that power. It comes from within, and you got to dig it out.
Yeah. But what's interesting, I mean, absolutely true. The only way that you get better is by practicing.
And
you know, and
yeah,
and the key to that is just think about it. Just, and I, in my mind, it doesn't have to be a constant and a consistent, like you're always doing it, but be thinking preparedness.
right.
Do a practice.
And you play like you practice. And if you're going to practice sloppy, you're going to play sloppy. And in this game, everybody doesn't get a participation medal. In this game,
that's right.
It could be the difference between life and death.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to play for preparedness and you want to practice for preparedness, you do actually want to get out there. And I'm not saying go on one of those game shows where you're like naked and afraid in the frozen tundra for 100 days and you have to survive with a buck knife. But I am saying, when I don't go to a rifle range or a firearms range very often, because when I go there for like a good solid hour or so, and I blow a bunch of ammo. And when I do it, I make sure my sights are on target and I've got all of my finger, hand, and manual muscle movement memory building back up, and I'm getting still on target, and it's like boom, 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 boom. A lot of people go to a firearms range just to go plink and have fun and blow some ammo off and ping, ping, ping.
It's expensive these days,
and it's getting more expensive. But I have a little bit of fun with it. But mine is like, that target down there is a threat that I have to take out, and this is serious. I've got like 2 seconds to do it, and boom, boom, and down, and scan on safe, weapon on the bench, hands off. And you have to practice like in that condition, or if you're gonna be doing martial arts and you're striking your punch dummy, you want to be striking this with the same amount of energy and force of a real fight. Which, if you're in a real fight, the first thing that happens when you're in a real fight, after the posturing and the first thing that happens is you just about piss yourself. I don't care how much of a veteran you are. But once the fight happens and you start getting into it, because this is something important, Matt, because a lot of people haven't been in a fight. So I don't care if you're Vanderlei Silva. Just before the fight starts, you're even, no matter how much of a veteran you are, you're pretty nervous. And when it starts, you're in a serious, and you need to try to resolve this fight depending on your strategy. Like I said, is it an earth force? Is it a water force? Is it an air force? Because if it's an air force, you're for somebody like me, I'm going to have to try to do a different kind of approach, and you're going to have to try to defend more strikes or something like that. But it doesn't matter what you're training for. If you might want to train for a week or so and just living on one meal a day or something. But practice like you play.
And that's the beauty. I think that's the beauty of being prepared, is that it's something new and interesting you can do every single week.
Almost every week.
You pick, that's 52 times a year that you can sit there and come up with a new thing that you can do. And that maybe that's something that, we can help the audience with, is just preparing, just giving little things each week that somebody can do. I've been trying to do it on our TikTok and our Instagram channels. You've been providing some great content of just information that people can gain, can start to look at some new piece of equipment or whatever it might be. But every week, just think of something that you can do. I really like that idea. I was going to try to do it with my daughter at one point in time. My wife and sons went away. I think it was on a mission trip or something. And my daughter and I we were there alone for, I think it was like 5 days, something like that. And I threatened her. I said, we're going to eat only dried food. And it wasn't because I didn't want to cook. It was just because I was like, let's just try this and see what happens. And it was funny because she, it was one of those like mountain house prepared foods or something like that. And we just
Oh,
put it in,
yeah.
poured the water into the bag and sat there
Yeah.
and let it cook for a while, or,
Yeah.
heat up for a while. And it was, and she was like, oh, this is great.
It's actually
I
good.
love this stuff. And she was like, every Friday night for the next couple of months, she wanted to have just a dried food kind of thing. And oh man,
Yeah,
here we
we're
go.
trying one of those meals. I think Sunday we might cook up one of those breakfast meals. It's got
Oof.
like instant eggs and potatoes and stuff like that.
Eggs, yeah.
So
yeah,
it should feed 2 people for most of the day, and they cost about $9 at Walmart. And there's a variety of different meals ready to eat and survival things you get. And I think Sunday too, I have to practice setting up this new truck bed tent I've got, because we're going to take that out next weekend.
Yeah.
So we've got a new truck bed tent. We've got to set up the air mattress underneath it, and we're going to have to lay out something on top of it to protect it from Scout's big old meat hooks.
Yeah.
So make sure the mattress doesn't get punctured.
Yeah, right.
Because he's got paws that are about as hard as a rock. Because I run him on basically the road a lot.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, Scout? Oh, he's down here like,
yes.
Scout ain't prepared for nothing. Scout, the only thing Scout's prepared for is to play Frisbee.
Hey man, he was taking that there was a branch in the stream that you were in. He was tearing up that thing.
He had a big old branch too.
Yeah.
It's funny. The funny thing about Scout is in different areas, he knows different words. So he knows stick, he knows Frisbee, he knows ball, things like that. So he won't play. We go out to one area, Frisbee is the only thing he'll play. If we go out to the creek, he won't play with Frisbee or the ball. It's only stick. You come out here, he won't play with the stick. It's only Frisbee. And then there's another area where it's only the ball. He's a funny dog.
Yeah, that's a strange dog. Strange guy, strange dog. Yep.
Yeah. I heard that.
What? Huh?
Me?
Okay, so I wanted to finish up the discussion today. Just the concept is to always be, or as much as possible, just be thinking preparedness. And so I wanted to throw out some examples, some things you can do as exercises. And Ed, feel free and jump in at any point in time. But one of the most common, I actually did a one of those Google like keyword searches for preparedness, just to see what people are searching for on Google. And you know what the number one thing was? Fire drills.
Fire drills, huh?
Fire drills. Be prepared for a fire. Whether it's now at the schools, they always go through fire drills, right? I don't know how often, but it's like, a couple times a semester type of thing.
It depends on how often some kid like me pulls the fire thing too.
Yeah, no. Well, let's not go that. I'm not sure the statute of limitations is over yet, Ed.
Yeah, the statute of limitations is over for juvenile miscreant behavior.
Okay, you're 50 something now, so yeah, there you go. But fire drills for families, and there's two main things, right? Your escape plan, and then your gathering points. Gathering points meaning near your house, gathering points farther away in case your house is like exploding, or there's a much bigger fire that you need to be concerned with. Because even being 100 feet away from your home, man, my wife actually had one of her clients, the house next door to them caught fire, and the whole thing just blazes, right? The client's house was, oh gosh, I think it was like 60 or 70 feet away from this burning house. They had to evacuate their house.
Oh.
And when they came back the next day and looked at it after the fire's out and everything, they looked at the siding of their house that was next to the burning house. The siding was completely melted. All of it had to be completely replaced. And so you're talking about, I don't know what the actual temperature of a massively burning house, but you're not going to sit there 50 feet away from the house, 100 feet away from it. You got to get away.
You got to get a ways back. And that's a good point. There's a lot of wildfires quite often in California.
Yeah.
Arizona, places like that. And
Yeah.
they have to evacuate not just a little town or something like that. They have to evacuate whole regions.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some big fires that have come up these last couple of years. So,
Yeah. And that kind of goes to kind of because my brother's in that area now. We did a lot of camping as kids, but it goes to how I got into preparedness. As you said earlier in the thing, I didn't get into it because of, we camped a little bit when I was a kid or something like that. That's just something that we did. And I didn't get into it that much because I was in the Marines. What I did in the Marines, I just did in the Marines. For me, the main thing, I think, looking back on it, was that I got into a full-time New Mexico Army National Guard group called the Counter Drug Support Group. And when we worked on a counter drug mission, we did a lot of survival training, and we had former Marines and Rangers and stuff like that with us. And we would train this type of stuff, and their big thing was they had the survival manual, and they would go over building fires and stuff like this. And you have to recall, this was the days when Bill Clinton was in. So I served under Bush Sr., then Clinton, then Bush Jr., and Obama.
wow.
And it was the Clinton days where everybody was worried about the government more. So there's a little bit of that fringe element that out there that was like, you got to worry about like Ruby Ridge and Waco and stuff like that. So there's a lot of people prepping then. Yep. And I was in the Guard doing that kind of stuff, but it was a full-time job, and all day for sometimes a week or so at a time, we'd be out in the middle of nowhere camping. And we would be building our own fires, or we would have a whisper stove, or we would have meals ready to eat for a week.
Yeah.
Or we'd go survival fishing, or we would go kill a rattlesnake or something like that. We would do signals. We would use a signal mirror or a variety of different signals, and do land navigation and stuff like that. That's when I started to get more and more into prepping, and I started becoming more of a Boy Scout and learning survival and packing a little bit of my stuff. Like, I'd have a tent all the time, and a sleeping bag, and boots, and rain gear, and a couple of MREs, and fishing gear, and fire starting gear, and stuff like that. That's when it was for me. That's when I started I already had some military training and stuff like that, but it was with the Counter Drug Support Group that's when I got into super preparedness. And hopefully I'll be able to help you share with our fans and audience some things. And we're not subject matter experts. If anybody has any questions or comments, they can always ask us, or they can give us suggestions and things like that. But
yeah, I think as we've talked about before, I think one of the things that'll be really exciting is if the audience says, hey, we've got this thing, this particular product, or we've got this particular scenario that we want you guys to conceptualize.
Yeah.
How would you react in this type of environment, this type of situation?
That's good feedback.
I think as much as people want, we would love to hear that feedback. We'd love to hear people give us more ideas. And in particular, I consider it a challenge because I feel like I've done so much preparing in my mind and had to react in several situations where I wouldn't say life risk per se, but potentially life risk type of scenarios. And I've either talked the situation down so I don't feel at risk, my life is at risk, or I've responded appropriately and gotten myself home safe,
Sure.
So that's I'm really excited to see what other people's ideas are. So please, audience, feed us more information as much as you can, and let's keep the conversation going. There were a couple of other things that I thought would be interesting. Bug out bags is a big part of what we talk about on the show. Either consider buying a bug out bag or do a little bit of research, and I'm happy to provide what detail I have found on what it takes to put into a bug out bag. We've already talked about like the top 4 reasons, the water based on the survival rule of 3s. We've already talked about that quite a bit. So conceptualizing what should go in a bag, and then build your own bag. You know,
Yep.
if you want to buy one from Amazon or whatever these there are hundreds of sites that you could choose from. If you want to buy one, you can
Yep.
buy one. But if you don't know what's in it, if you're not trained on what's in it, then it's useless information. It's useless material to have, right? And then the other thing that I was thinking of is creating a plan that lasts. Don't try to do everything at once. You know, I went to a, I think it was FEMA or Homeland Security, one of the big preparedness sites, and they actually have this really cool mock-up of a 12-month plan. So based on the survival rule of threes, and then it continues after that. But you say, do you have enough water to survive, and not just 3 days, which is the typical requirement, but it's 2 weeks. Do you have enough water for your entire family, gallon a day, 2 weeks? For me, it's 72 gallons is what I should have available. And so I'm like, holy cow, where the hell am I going to keep 72 gallons?
Is that a gallon per person?
Per person per day.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I was going to say, because
actually,
I can drink a gallon of water a day myself.
Yeah.
And that's just drinking. That's not washing my hands or anything else.
That's where it gets really tricky because if you look at, that's just potable water that you can use for drinking and cleaning and things like that. Stuff that's basically to your health, right? But there's other statistics that say if you like, man. Anyways, let's not go too much because we will have a whole new show on water, just water. Because there's so much that can be talked about just related to water. But anyways, so you create a 12-month plan that says this month you just focus on water. Next month, food. Next month, shelter, and that can be in cold weather, X, in warm weather, Y. You know, there could be different ways to solve. So each month you take a different topic, you work on that topic, you solve that problem.
And that's the beauty of that survival manual that we'll be going over in a future episode. Is the survival manual is actually broken up into sections that are very easy to digest. They're very practical, and you can practice one of those things a week or so. And one thing is, one session you might be learning about poisonous snakes. The next session you might be learning about edible berries and stuff like that out in the wilderness. So there's a variety of ways of preparing, and taking everything in little sections digestible sections is a really cool way of going about it. Yeah, I agree with that, Matt.
Yeah. Quick side note on that, on the edible berries and such. There's actually in many different areas. Go to Facebook, look up foraging, and in your area, look up a Facebook group, and ask to join that group. In our area, there's this group that I belong to that every single day they're posting different mushrooms that you can eat, different berries that you can eat, all the leaves that you can eat. What we typically thought of as weeds out in our yard is an entire salad.
Wow.
And we're just walking around going, I mean, how can you go hungry in this type of scenario when there's so many plants and things around you that you can eat? You know, and the other cool part about it is you can actually, if you're walking on a trail sometime and you see this plant and you go, I wonder what that is. There's so many here. I want to know what that plant is. You go take a couple of snapshots of it, put your hand next to it. So it gives them an idea of the size. They'll take it into their little software, tell you exactly what it is, tell you how to prepare it best. Use it like you would use spinach, or mix it in with this, saute some, a little bit of garlic with that, and you'll have a great little side dish for your chicken or whatever. It's incredible stuff.
Because Red Lobster's not open all the time.
That's right. Although maybe it is.
And to our audience, the fans, listeners out there, if you're in one of those younger generations, when we talk about edibles, by the way, we're not talking about
well,
gummies
we were talking about mushrooms
and brownies.
I'm just saying we were talking about mushrooms.
Yeah, we were talking about mushrooms, but we're talking about like edible berries for sustenance.
For sustenance.
Not edibles for getting high.
Not for hallucination. Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness.
You stoners. Are you guys all stoned? Okay, Matt, we've got the 9/11 episode coming up with those interviews, September 11 attack interviews.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a bunch of exciting new episodes coming up with a variety of different things. What else is going on, Matt?
I guess the last thing I would close out this with teaching yourself to be prepared is consider when you go into a gym or department store or yeah. Oh my.
Insanity. Woo! Ric Flair.
Any grocery store. I was actually thinking about this because this is something I do on a regular basis. I'll go in right when I walk in. I know my exit. One exit is right behind me. Where's the other exit? Because there's always got to be two exits, right? And it might be something like if you're at the back of the store, go out the back exit, go out through the warehouse, whatever it may be. But think to yourself, if somebody came in and you heard loud bangs and things like that, think to yourself, how am I going to react? You're sitting there in a department store, grocery store, gym. Where am I going to hide?
Mm-hmm.
Or how am I going to defend myself? When am I going to attack that person? How am I going to protect my family? Yeah. All these different things. You should start to just think it through in your mind and make yourself more prepared. It's as simple as that. And it's just a constant thing in the back of your mind that will prepare you for that day when difficult times do hit. So that's kind of my parting shot for today, Ed. What about you?
Yeah, my parting shot is going to be yet another reminder of our upcoming episode for the September 11 attack. And that is one of the linchpins or cornerstones of our whole preparedness thing. Is nobody knew, nobody thought of things like that at that time, not at our level anyway.
That's right.
I think we looked at movies in the late 70s and early 80s, like Black Sunday, where you have a Vietnam veteran disgruntled, gets, interestingly enough, aligned with an Islamic terrorist group. And he gets out of Vietnam as a helicopter pilot and becomes a blimp pilot. And they're going to fly an explosive laden blimp into the Super Bowl crowd.
Oh, wow.
And you had Executive Decision and other movies like that, where you're talking about basically an aerial bomb or weapon of mass destruction coming into America. So although there was Hollywood and there was the Presidential Daily Brief and there was Operation Able Danger and a whole bunch of other things, that was at that level. At our level, even though we watched those movies, nobody could have fathomed that. Nobody was prepared for that. Nobody was prepared for that.
Right.
Not even, especially New Yorkers. They hit New Yorkers the worst. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. And wild and crazy things happen in New York on the daily. And nobody could believe what they were seeing. So that goes back to as a final parting shot, Semper Gumby. Always flexible. If you can be mentally flexible, that might be one of your key first steps in being always at least a little bit mentally prepared, or at least mentally ready to absorb some of the shock. Because there's going to be some things, if in a preparedness situation, there's going to be some things that shock you. Like, well, you'd be driving down the road and run into a fatal accident. You're going to see dead bodies there.
Yeah.
Are you prepared to stop and make a 911 call and get people out there and render aid to those who are still living?
Right.
There's a bunch of scenarios to prepare for it. And my parting shot is coming off of the cornerstone of the September 11 attacks, in which we're going to have that episode with our interviewed guests. Semper Gumby, always flexible. Prepare your mind. And if you prepare your mind and you figure out your why, you're going to figure out your how. And all the pieces should slowly start falling into place.
Amen. Amen. Well, there we have it. Another great show. So excited about what's coming. We've got so many different ideas on episodes that we're already working on. Do not miss the September 11 show.
Yeah.
We've got so much interesting stuff. We may even break it up into multiple shows, because there's so much great material that we're getting with these folks that we're talking with. So very excited to see that coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Matt Marshall.
And I'm Ed Lawson, signing off.